When billions of international aid to Russia went astray and came through Jersey, and I gather what is now was a Crown officer was involved in the setting up of the country, which was the company, which was facilitating the transfer. That it's not much mentioned now. I presume all that money has been dispensed, got rid of. Is it still sitting in somebody's bank account here, do you think?
I certainly think some of the money was dispensed, a large part of it wasn't. I don't know what happened, but in that particular case, the Crown officer involved, or at that time private attorneys, who was the director of the company involved, said, well, look, I was just a director, I didn't know what the company was doing. That kind of excuse doesn't wash very well in the courts of other outside Jersey. He would have been totally culpable in any.
The argument is always made was made in that particular instance. Well, it couldn't happen now. The regulations have been tightened up, but comes out whenever there is a scandal.
Absolutely, and this is what I find so corrupt about this. Yes, the regulations have been tightened up. Any bit of paper is only worth the bit of paper for so long as there's no serious attempt at compliance. The paper is worthless, and that's the situation which you find here in Jersey. There's no serious effort put behind investigation and ensuring compliance.
If regulation can't control places like Jersey, what will control them ultimately? Where is the remedy for the world for places? If what they're doing is bad, Jersey, Guernsey, then there are dozens of places around the world. What is the ultimate remedy for them?
I mean, regrettably, Jersey's history shows that places like Jersey will not reform themselves. The reform is imposed by the outside world in response to the egregious damage done by places like Jersey on the outside world, and I don't think Jersey is capable of reforming itself. But there is a new spirit abroad. It's not a political spirit, it hasn't yet got into the political mainstream, but I think people across the world are literally the victims of Jersey, are beginning to realise and wake up to the fact that they are the victims of this offshore system. And I think that will build political pressure at European level, in America, and eventually that pressure will feed through to the Financial Action Task Force and the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development and the EU, and there will be a tightening of standards. And at that stage, with all due respect to Jersey, they will have absolutely no control over what happens.
Because unfortunately, the capitalist system, it has a tendency to just move on to the next rich pickings. It'd be quite happy just to leave places like Jersey, Guernsey behind, and if they're...
Of course, the next rich pickings don't lie in the European arena any longer. They lie far, far to the east of here. Capitalism is incredibly mobile. It is incredibly innovative. Capitalism version 3, which is the ultra-libertarian, ultra-liberal economic system put in place initially by Mrs. Thatcher, building on the ideas of the Institute of Economic Affairs, that model has now comprehensively failed. And I think most people recognise it's not capable of delivering reform. Jersey is part of that model, and I think capitalism version 4 will be a very different one. It will also be geographically relocated to the Far East. And I don't think that Jersey will be able to pick up sufficient volume of business in China or India or whatever to be able to pick a way forward. I think that Jersey will gradually see its finance industry decline, and I suppose what concerns me most about Jersey is that there's very little evidence of any entrepreneurial spirit, of anyone who has got what it takes to move forward. They just haven't got it. There's no hunger to innovate and do anything interesting.
The panic that's running through Europe, especially Europe at the moment, looking for missing monies, not because their economies are collapsing. They're desperate for revenue from somewhere. Obviously the Channel Islands, the Isle of Man are going to be looked at very closely. And do you think, can you see where the lead will come from on that? Which is going to, obviously Germany, for example, is being asked to bail out countries. You can't imagine Germany bailing out countries if activities of the tax haven nature are allowed to carry on.
Well, I certainly don't think the lead will come out of the UK. The current British government, a coalition government, shows no appetite for seriously tackling this. The European Union is showing signs. There are some very serious politicians now within the European Parliament, including the former chairman of the board of Tax Justice Network, who is sitting in the relevant parliamentary committee, the Monetary and Economic Affairs Committee, who are pushing forward a very, very strong agenda now for strengthening transparency. The Transparency Bill could very well have a major impact, requiring disclosure of corporate beneficial ownership, for example, stronger sharing of information, corporate accountability and so on. Bit by bit, this will slice away at the secrecy which ultimately is all that Jersey can offer.
Unfortunately, we're having to fall into the trap of talking about the pounds, shillings and pence, or the euros, or whatever it is. Really, the real damage, one of your particulars, is environmental damage. That's one of your concerns. What happens to the poor guy and the ordinary guy? What awareness is there of the actual damage that is being done? Is that the environmental movement still talks about environmental damage in green terms? And again, it's the pound, shillings and pence thing. But how is the linkage? Where are they going to get linked together, these things?
Well, interestingly, it's the Green parties in Europe, oddly enough, who have been the fastest to react to this agenda. They've been the fastest to pick up on the tax haven issue. So you have, for example, a presidential candidate for the French presidency, a former examining magistrate, a Green Party member within the European Parliament. I'm talking about Madame Ida Joly, who heads the European Parliament's Development Committee on an anti-corruption, anti-tax haven initiative, because she's able to make the links. You know, if you want to look at why forests are being despoiled in Indonesia, it's not because bad men like cutting down trees, it's because bad men recognize that if you cut down trees you can make a fortune and spirit them out of Indonesia and the other parts of the world which are being deforested into tax havens and hide your money and so on. And bad men have realized that if you want to corrupt politicians, you pay them a large whack into an offshore company which goes into an offshore bank account, and happy days, you've got your political influence. So I think, oddly enough, it's the Green movement that's been the driving force behind many of the initiatives, and that remains the case. I think the others on the left, for example, socialist movements, have been slow comers to this issue. Goodness knows why, because they should have seen the impact upon ordinary working people of tax havens. But they've been asleep at the wheel for donkey's years. It's been the Green movement that's been pushing it.
The French government some years ago threatened to cut off Monaco's electricity supply. I forget what the issue was. They could equally do the same for Jersey and Guernsey. Do you think that sort of action might wake people up? The electricity supply did go off here last week for a couple of half hours, but...
Yes, absolutely. I mean, people say to me, well, we have no jurisdiction to interfere in the affairs of Jersey. Au contraire, they could do it immediately. It was interesting that immediately after 9/11, when George Bush realized that some of the funding might for the 9/11 atrocities might have come through an offshore company in the Bahamas, he simply said to them, either you reveal the background who's behind these companies, or we'll switch you off the world's banking wire networks. Not just that bank, but we'll switch the entire island off the banking networks. And hey presto, they acquiesced immediately. If there was political will to tackle these issues, they would be tackled immediately. It isn't rocket science. There are plenty of remedies which would close down tax havens immediately. What's lacking is political will, and the reason for that is because if you look at the party political funding in so many cases, within Britain and elsewhere, it comes from offshore sources. If you look at the politicians themselves, you'll find that many of them are, I mean, including the current Chancellor of the Exchequer, are themselves users of Cayman Islands and so on. I think it's becoming clearer that this is an incredibly corrupting political economy. The political economy of tax havens is extraordinarily corrupting, and I think ordinary Joes are beginning to realise that.
We could go on, but we better stop there. Thanks much indeed.